Hey, good lifers. This basket of tomatoes is really heavy, but if you want to see it turn into the nicest ketchup in the world, carry on, watch it. So this isn't actually my ketchup recipe, although I will be modifying it slightly because that's what I do with recipes. It actually comes from a book called Precycle, which is this one here. I'm not sure if it's even in print anymore, but it is a phenomenal book. It's less of a cookery book and more of a how to reuse kind of like leftovers and how to make things book. And this recipe for ketchup is in there and it is absolutely divine. Every time I make this recipe, I have friends and family knocking on my door, telling and sending me messages over WhatsApp going, "You got any jars of your ketchup going free?" So I think they must have a sixth sense that I'm making it. It's really simple to make. You need 5 kilograms of tomatoes. Not sure how much that is in pounds. I'll pop it just there. You need 2 large onions. For good measure, I'm using 1 red onion, 1 white onion. I'm also chucking in a shallot because I found it in the onions basket and I figured why not. You will need a couple of sticks of cinnamon. You can use cinnamon powder if you want to, so don't worry if you haven't got that. A little pinch of cayenne pepper, which we've got in here. You're going to need 6 garlic cloves just here. I've also got salt in there as well. You're going to need a couple of teaspoons of salt for this recipe. And the other thing that we're going to be doing is making what we call a bouquet garni. Now, I'm so sorry. My pronunciation is probably terrible. But in that is basically a few bay leaves. You can just see it here. We've got a few bay leaves, these ones, some black peppercorns and some whole cloves. Don't use too many cloves because we don't want the whole thing tasting like Christmas. You can obviously put your bouquet garni in a little square of muslin and then tie it up that way. I prefer to use a homemade tea bag, which is these ones here. These are really useful. This is what I put my herbal teas in. So if someone isn't well in my house, the first line of defense is some form of herbal tea generally. So this is what I make my herbal teas in. I'm just going to pop my ingredients from my bouquet garni in there, or I'm going to try to anyway. I'm going to just do it up like this, and then I'm going to tie it. This just means that it's easy to fish out later on because we obviously don't want this going into our jar of ketchup. The cinnamon sticks are big enough that I can fish them out on their own, so that's good. There we go. I'm also really excited about this recipe because I get to use my big preserving pan, which is a little bit of a present to myself. And I'm very excited about using it. I've not used it yet, so this is my first project. I wanted it to be a project that I was excited about to use it. And this is definitely one I'm excited about. Oh, one ingredient I completely forgot to mention also is cider vinegar. This is actually our homemade cider vinegar that we made last year. You're going to need around about a pint of that, so I've got my measuring jug ready. Right, the first thing we need to do is get chopping these tomatoes. So you don't have to chop these particularly evenly. I'm literally just going to do them in quarters, and then I'm going to pop them in the bowl I've got here. Probably going to have to do this in 2 halves, to be honest, because there are a lot of tomatoes here. I went out specifically to get these because we're running out of ketchup, and it's either that or we buy the store-bought one. And there's nothing wrong with it. Hey, you know, millions of people across the world eat it. But for us, once you've tried your own homemade ketchup, there's just no comparison anymore. So, yeah, I swear, make this recipe and you will never, ever want to go back. And it's going to be even better, hopefully, next year when we get to have our own tomatoes. Well, I say next year, probably this year, actually. Keep forgetting it's July already. I'm just quartering these up. We're going to pop them in the pan in a minute and get them simmered down. I'm not too worried about taking the seeds off of them. The recipe does say, actually, to boil them and take the skins off of them. However, I don't think that's necessary. I've made this recipe so often now that I realise that taking the skins off just isn't necessary. We actually prefer a slightly chunkier ketchup anyway. So this is kind of half ketchup, half tomato chutney, I suppose. So you're expecting a little bit more fibre, I suppose, in it. But if you wanted to, a step before this would definitely be to boil up your tomatoes and take the skins off, or to skin them by hand. So as you can see, this bowl is pretty much full now. I'm going to go and put this half of the tomatoes into my big preserving pan. And I'm just going to start it on a really low simmer. I don't want it to cook, these all to cook up too much, to be honest, but I do want to get the pan warm and get everything ready. So pan's already on the stove, ready to go. I'm going to start by popping these tomatoes in the pan now. So I'm going to get the rest of the tomatoes chopped up and popped into the bowl. At the same time, I've also thoroughly washed my jars, ready to go, and I've washed the lids as well. I am a reuser of jars, and I'm really terrible at taking the labels off of them. So when I get the jars out of the oven, you will see all sorts of different types of labels on them. This is because I'm too lazy to take the labels off. If I was doing this for anyone other than friends, family, and ourselves, then I probably would take the labels off to make it look pretty, but I'm not. So that's what we're going to do. We're also going to be jarring this up or canning this up. What I think you guys in the States call open kettle canning. And that is where we get our preserve and we get our jars boiling hot. And we put boiling hot preserves into boiling hot jars. And then we let the heat, as the heat cools down, the jar actually creates a seal. So that's what we're doing now. There is a lot of controversy about open kettle canning and how safe it is, but I've made this recipe a lot and I've never had any problems with it. But if you are concerned about that, I would suggest that this recipe actually would do really well with water bath canning. So you can give that a go. So I've got my tomatoes all done there. The recipe says to finely chop an onion. I would normally do this in a food processor, in all honesty, but I'm going to do it by hand now, mainly because the other camera is sitting on top of my food processor, so don't want to go moving it. Look at that. Onions that even Gordon Ramsay would be pleased with. Probably not. He'd probably swear at me for being a really messy chef. I'm also going to pop this shallot in as well. Why not? Figured it might as well. The best thing about this recipe is you can just change it around to suit your needs. When I made it a few months ago, we didn't actually have any cider vinegar because it was still busy fermenting. I made it with red wine vinegar. Tasted lovely. Good, so they are all in there nicely. The next ingredient is our garlics. It says 5 cloves of garlic, so naturally I've got 6 here. And they're supposed to be minced, so I'm actually got garlic mincer, but what I have got is one of these little kind of garlic, what do you call them, graters. So I'll use that instead. Just going to grate the garlic in here nicely like that. And go down a lot quicker than I thought it would actually. None of this stuff has to be done particularly well or evenly because it'll all mash down in the end. Okay, all done. Pop that all in there, and I'm going to go and give my hands a quick wash because although I love garlic, garlic sticky fingers is not nice. Great, so that lot's done. I'm going to go and put this in my big preserving pan. Oh, I do love this pan. So now everything's in my big preserving pan. The only thing I've got left to pop in is my bouquet garni and some salt. I'm going to pop the salt in now. And I've got a little pinch of cayenne pepper to put in. I am an absolute wimp when it comes to spice. So I'm literally only going to put the tiniest amount in, but it doesn't need to be really spicy. So the last two ingredients are my cinnamon. Let's pop that in. And then I've got a pint of cider vinegar to put in as well. So 1 pint is about 500 and something millilitres. So I only have milliliter measures on this one. So I'm going to have to do it in 3 different rounds because it only goes up to 200 ml. And the last bit is just our bouquet garni. I was going to try and hook it up to the side of the pan, see if I could just let it dangle in. I don't think it's going to be doable, so I'm just going to pop it in the pan and fish it out when we're done. Okay, everything's in a pan. Let's switch you over so you can see what we're looking at. So everything is in our pan, ready to go. Just going to give it a mix up. I'm absolutely loving this pan. It's huge. So the main recipe does say to peel the tomatoes beforehand, but I've never seen that as a good use of my time, in all honesty. Because you're going to have to sieve it anyway, so you might as well just sieve out the skins while you sieve it. It's always been my thought. So we're going to turn up the heat on that and let that simmer. Going to bury that bouquet garni in, make sure it's in there nicely. I completely forgot that this recipe does also require 8 ounces of sugar. So I've just popped that in there, and that can help that all melt down. So we're going to leave this to simmer for about half an hour-ish, see how it goes. And then we're going to come back and mush up all of the garlic with our musher here. Not the garlic, sorry, the tomatoes. I've got garlic on the brain. So all of those tomatoes are doing well. We're going to let them cook down nicely and simmer. I do want to leave the lid off of the pan so that hopefully the extra liquid can start to simmer off as well. Good. I'll meet you back in half an hour or so. Hey, just a quick note to interrupt this video. I have noticed there's quite a few of you that watch that aren't subscribed. Now, you don't have to subscribe, but if you do want to, it would actually warm my heart. Just come back to check on the ketchup, and it is looking good. So we can see all of those tomatoes are beginning to cook down nicely. So at this point, you can actually strain your ketchup and then just reduce down the sauce a bit more. But I like to just let it reduce down a bit more naturally, and then I'm going to whiz it up in the food processor in batches, I think, because I'm not going to fit all of this in my food processor. The idea of me whizzing it up just means that it's all mushed down a little bit more and I can thicken it up later. Again, I'm going to sift it all out, so I don't mind the fact that there's seeds and bits of skin and all sorts in there at the moment. It doesn't look much like ketchup right now, but trust me, it will be. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a jug full out, make sure that I haven't got the bouquet garni in there, make sure that the cinnamon stick's not in there. I'm going to chuck it in my food processor and just begin to whiz it down a little bit. This does speed the process up a little bit, but we're not necessarily looking to speed the process up, just makes it a little bit easier. And obviously be careful when you're whizzing up hot things in a food processor. Make sure you've got a food processor that can do hot things. My bullet blender cannot do hot things and it will explode. So this is why we do it in the processor rather than the blender. So now I've whizzed up some of the mixture. I'm just popping it back in. You can see it's a lot more kind of chopped up now and mushed up. sauces. I just find that makes this process a little bit faster, also a little bit easier as well. So again, we're just going to mix it up. It looks like a really nice massive soup at the moment. It'll be a little bit of sweet if it's a soup, but now it is just a case of letting this cook down and simmer down nicely and coming back to it later on when it looks like it's doing something. We can actually give it a try now. Let's give it a try. So it's not going to be our concentrated. You can see there it's really kind of liquidy currently at the moment, which is not what we want. We want a nice thick mixture, and we'll get that once this is cooked down. Actually, taste-wise, it's really nice. So it's way too sweet to have it as soup, but it's definitely really nice. You can tell that it's definitely going to make quite a nice ketchup. So, yeah, we'll just leave that cooking down. Okay, this has been boiling for a really, really long time, actually. I always forget how long this takes. It does actually take ages to actually boil down. What I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to begin to take out some of the chunky bits so that when it's boiling down, it's only working on boiling down the bits that we actually want. So I'm going to do that now. I didn't want to move the camera. Okay, so this chop is actually really simple. I'm going to scoop out some of the mixture and then pop it through and push it through this sieve here. So what we should be left with is just the liquid in this bowl. I've got the bowl on a trivet as well, just to protect the surfaces a little bit. And I'm going to be using one of my surface safers to protect this bit of surface from the hot jug. So off we go with this one. You can see here, I'm pushing it through. And just under here, we've got, this is just pure liquid here that we're going to have to reduce down a lot. So these tomatoes were actually really juicy, which although that's good, that does mean that we've got a lot of reduction to do. But that's okay, not a problem. I've got another bowl here that I'm probably going to end up putting the pulp into, because I don't want that to be in my liquid. So I've just put that liquid back in here. So we've still got some of the bits and pieces in it, some of the pulp. I'll show you there. We've still got quite a lot of the pulp in it. I'm not too worried about the fact that there's still some left. I'm going to take most of this out later. But this just gives me an idea of how much reduction we've got to do on this. And considering this is supposed to be a dipping sauce, this is still way too thin. So we're going to turn the heat back up a little bit and probably leave it to go for a good few hours. If you're doing this one at home, you're probably going to have to come and check on it quite regularly and just give it a stir. Make sure it's not burning on the bottom. Nobody wants burnt ketchup. But other than that, it is just a case of giving it a good stir and waiting for it to reduce down, really. G has just come home and said that it smells really lovely, so I must be doing something right. So I'm going to carry on kind of stirring this, letting it reduce down a little bit more, and I will come and check on it periodically. At this rate, I think I will probably be popping a lid on it overnight, because I've not got that many hours left in today, and I will probably continue reducing it down tomorrow. So I shall see you later. Hello, it is the next day. So I have actually had this now on the stove for a good few hours. I forgot how long it is. And what I have just been doing is taking out spoonfuls of the liquid, as you can see here, and then just kind of letting them drain through a sieve, just so that we start to get out most of the pulp. I actually quite like a bit of a chunky ketchup, to be honest, so I'm not too worried about taking out all of the pulp. I've taken out the herbs and spices little pack there, and I've taken out the cinnamon sticks, so they're not going to be, no one's going to be chowing down on them. And I've whizzed up the pulp so it's a little bit less chewy. And I've taken quite a lot of it out already, which is going to go into my compost bin. However, this is just, all I'm doing here is basically just taking out bits of pulp. And you can see already, it's kind of, you can just about see that kind of texture. That's what it will be eventually. So we're just kind of working on that at the moment and letting it cool down. I've got it on a fairly low heat because I don't want it to... Let's pop that in the bowl. I can actually see the bowl of pulp that I've got here. So this is the bowl of pulp that I've got. Oh, you can just about see it there. So all of this stuff's just going to go into my compost bin. But we have got a nice lot of ketchup going. Obviously, it's way too liquid at the moment. It's still kind of a soupy liquid consistency at the moment. But that's okay, because it just means another few hours on the stove. Just kind of working its way down so that it's a much better texture. We're just kind of evaporating off all of that water. I like to do this gently. You can do it a little bit quicker, obviously, by turning the heat up. But then you've got to be around with it all day, or for the few hours it will take you. Whereas if you do it gently on a lower heat, you can afford to leave it for an hour or so and not have to come back and check on it. And considering I am kind of doing this between other bits and pieces that I have to do today, yeah, it's the best way for me to do it. But we're already seeing actually that all the large bits of pulp are already gone. So this is all stuff that is just going to mush down. Going to get most of the seeds out this way. But as I said, I quite like a chunky ketchup, so I'm fine if there's a bit of pulp in there. So that's looking really good. I'm actually just going to leave this to carry on doing its thing. As I say, it's on a very gentle heat at the moment, so it's just gently evaporating off. We want it to get down to a nice kind of sauce, dipping sauce type consistency. Obviously, at the moment, it's very kind of liquid consistency, and we're probably going to reduce that down by about half. So it's amazing, really, to think that this whole preserving pan has gone from pretty much full of tomatoes down to this tiny little amount that we get here. So it's probably not the most effective use of tomatoes. But what I have found is that different varieties of tomato actually make different quantities of ketchup. So I've just got a bog standard kind of salad tomato from here, which they generally tend to have a lot more liquid in them. So you don't normally get as much, ironically. But if you use something like a bit more of a denser, beefier type of tomato. I'm not very good with variety names, so I couldn't tell you which one right now. But one that's got a little bit less liquid and a bit more kind of flesh into it, you do generally tend to get a bit more ketchup out of it. So, yeah, we will just let this evaporate off, and then hopefully, when I see you again in a few hours' time, we should have something that looks a little bit more like ketchup. What I am going to do is, you can just see... You probably can't see over here, actually, but I've got a load of jars ready. And what I will do is I will start popping them in the oven and getting them warmed up and sterilised. As always, we want to put hot preserves into a hot jar. That's the idea with that one. So we'll pop that in, but we need to have it slightly less liquid consistency and a little bit more ketchup consistency before we do that. So I will see you again in a few hours. Okay, we are back, and I'm happy to report that this looks very, very done. So the way I test this ketchup, very similar to how I test jams and how I test chutneys, is we've got it moving on the bottom of the pan here. If I pull it across, we can just see there's a little bit of clear. I'll do it nice and quickly there. It's nice and clean. So different preserves require different levels of setness. If it's a jam, you want to make sure it's nice, like when you put it back, it's really nice and clear. For ketchup, I want it to be a little bit looser. So the fact that I can see a little bit of clearness, I managed to get myself with it. The fact that I can see a little bit of clearness is absolutely fine. That's exactly where I want it. So now I am ready to take the heat off of this, because remember also that this will, it's this will solidify slightly more when it goes into the jars as well. So now I am ready to take the heat off of this and get my jars ready. My jars are in the oven. They're warming up ready. I'm going to pop this over here onto the side of the worktop for me, and then I'm going to start jarring it up. So excited. Okay, so I need to move kind of quick with this, and you can just about see it where the camera's sitting. So I'm just going to literally pop my preserving funnel on and just start filling up these jars. You can tell I don't bother taking the labels off of jars unless I'm doing it for a friend or making it look nice. I'm not really that worried, to be honest. You don't need to leave much headroom, but I don't like to fit it all the way up to the top. I like to fit it just to about where the neck is. That'll be done. Next one. I'm not really taking much notice about which jars I fill either. I've got way too many jars out, but that's okay. With this, again, you want to make sure you're putting hot preserves into hot jars. That is the rule. I've not got nearly as many jars as I thought I had, sadly. I prefer to do smaller jars of ketchup because although we really like our homemade ketchup, we don't actually have enough food that requires us eating enough ketchup, to be honest. So it's a bit of an odd one, that. But we should get, hopefully, 4 jars out of these tomatoes. I'm a little bit sad that it's not more, to be honest. I've got to say, it should have been more, but I think it's just the type of tomatoes. Those ones are not that... They're a bit too watery, and because you've got to get most of the water out of them to make it into a sauce, they don't make as great a amount of tomato sauce that you were hoping. Okay, so I've got enough for those 4 jars that I've filled up just there. What I am going to do is put the rest into another jar. Let's just pop some lids on those. Hoping it's the only problem with using reused lids and jars is you have no idea which lids fit unless you're really good at remembering which is which. And I'm not good at remembering which is which. There we go. That one's too small. Okay, it's a slightly bigger jar. So I'm guessing this lid's going to be like that. So these you want to get on there and just make sure you tighten them up nicely. Done. And then leave them to it. What I am going to do is just pop the rest of the ketchup into a smaller jar. So I can remove these jars are just cool enough to handle now. I don't really want to handle the other ones too much because they're too hot there. So this one little jar I've got here, I'm just going to pop, where did I put my preserve in? Funnel, there we go. Just going to pop the remainder of the ketchup in here. This one I won't worry about trying to seal because there's not nearly enough ketchup to seal. And we'll just pop this one in the fridge. That's okay. So yeah, I'm a little bit sad about the amount of ketchup I've been left with, in all honesty. But we live and learn when it comes to doing preserving. And I know that these tomatoes are not the best when it comes to preserving ketchup, but main thing is it tastes good. It's definitely quite a sweet ketchup. It tastes nice and sweet, but that's good. We don't mind that. And that's that. That's pretty much everything. So I've got 4, then probably a quarter jars here. So yeah, that's it. I'm happy. I'm happy with this the way it is at the moment. And as I said, I'm just going to, now these are a bit not too bad to handle. I'm just going to make sure those lids are nice and tight. Go, and then as they cool down, these will seal. So these little poppers here, they'll be down and they'll seal nicely. So yeah, I will show you that when they're done. And that's it for today. And we have 4 and a bit jars of lovely ketchup. How gorgeous does that look? I cannot wait to give it a try. And this is obviously so much better than that rubbish that we get in the squeezy bottles. Yeah, it took a little bit of effort to get it into the jars and to get it all reduced down, but I promise you the taste is absolutely worth it. If you give this recipe a try, let me know how it tastes in the comments, and let me know how your family enjoys it too. I can't wait to see you in the next video. Bye.